Hello adventurers, and welcome back to my channel. I have been to the Leadville area time and time again because I love the ideal conditions for traveling through this portion of Colorado during the hot months. And every time I come here I find something really unique and different, from the history of the downtown and the mines to the mining museum and all of the natural spaces around. You cannot go wrong with this area, but today I'm going to share with you something we've never been to before. Today we are at the National Fish Hatchery. Today we are at the National Fish Hatchery. It is here at the hatchery that you can find a variety of different things. Right now we are over in the Upper Raceway area, as you can see indicated on this map right here, but we parked in a nature trail parking. Along the way also you'll see that they have a display pond, an isolation. They also have Hatchery Kiosk, and then also a National Historic Site sign. You have a visitor center right here, which we're definitely going to go check out for a little bit of info, and they have a few other things on site also. So you might be thinking, why are we at a fish hatchery? How is that interesting? Well, fish hatcheries are actually quite fascinating, and I've been to several before. As you travel from place to place, the fish hatcheries have different kinds of fish that they actually grow from babies, and then they release into various places around the state. So here in Colorado, getting to see this one here in Leadville is kind of interesting because we'll learn a little bit more about where the fish go from here. And as you can see from these images, there are a lot of little baby fish flying up and down in that raceway. I appreciate that as we travel around, it tells us a little bit more about why this is important and how they make it happen. Right here we learn about the moving of the water. The clean and fresh water is the lifeblood of the fish hatchery, and the pipes are its veins. So here you can see a variety of different pipes that have been used over time, from hollowed out logs to wooden pipes to, more currently, we use PVC. PVC is more commonly used today because it's inexpensive, it's strong, it's lightweight, and it doesn't corrode like some of these others might have. In fact, fun fact, did you know that the US has been using PVC pipes since about the 50s because it has created a much more simplistic way to move water without having to worry about as many bursts and as much rust and debris and minerals floating through your waterways. So that's kind of cool. One brain wrinkle that we didn't have before we got here. Now it's kind of hard to see, but this is actually one of the original pipes that would have been made out of hollowed out wood. Now I know this changes from time to time, but right now these are the stocking dates that they have done thus far this year. Turquoise and Twin Lakes, Joe Wright, Hayden Meadows, Crystal Lake, and Emerald Lake have all benefited from this hatchery. Also, they do have a feeder, so if I have some quarters, we might be feeding some fish in a minute. Now it always pays to read the signs, and here you can learn a little bit more about not only the recovery program for the fish, but also where they take these fish. Gives you a good map. We are currently very close to the Turquoise Lake. In fact, the campsite that I love to stay at is right here next to Turquoise Lake. And the fish hatchery is right here. But they also are putting things into some of these areas even further south. And you can learn a little bit more about some of the different kinds of fish right here. Everything from a tiny little 20-inch fish up to a 3-foot fish and even a 6-foot fish. Now, I for one am not wanting to encounter a 6-foot fish in the wild, so being able to see where it starts out is a much more manageable thing. I would be terrified that that guy could swallow like my whole leg. So it appears on this side we have the smaller fish, and then as we go over here they get a little bit larger, and so tiny, big, tiny, big, still not 6 feet. And then it looks like on this side we go back to tiny again. This is interesting, super interesting. I will say it's pretty cool to watch them for a little bit though, because the longer that you sit here, the more that you see the activity, and you'll see that somebody will jump up out of the water, and then another one will jump up out of the water, and then it'll just go back to normal again. And then it happens again and again. So take your time here, just really observe them. They're very fascinating, but there's more. There's definitely more here. So let's get a few more views, and then we're gonna go up to the visitor center. Okay, so now that we checked out those, it's now time for us to go up this way to find the visitor center. Now, not all hatcheries have visitor centers, but the ones that do usually have some really great information. So we're crossing our fingers on this one. But before we get there, we found the isolation room. This is periodically used because sometimes they have to bring things from the wild into this area to prevent the potential spread of pathogens to other fish. So this is considered the isolation room, and it has some of these photos of what exactly would happen here. Let's go check out this kiosk. We start off with this, which is an overall map of where we are and what is available to us. And you can see that there is a path that actually goes around. That is the nature trail. And the nature trail takes you from the parking lot where we parked all the way around and shows you all of the different lake viewpoints, which is really, really cool. It also tells you a little bit more about some of the historic buildings in the area, including an 1889 hatchery building that is still in use. They also have a display pond, the raceways, some day use area, the nature trail, and the Evergreen Lakes Hotel Historic Site, which is now an interpretive sign that describes a hotel which actually burned to the ground in 1894. Here we learn a little bit more about this area throughout the seasons and the things that you can expect to find. Did you know that you can snowshoe through this area? That's pretty cool. And last but not least, this right here. This is considered a National Historic Site. And because of that, there's a really neat history here that you can read a little bit more about right here at the kiosk. The hatchery itself was built in 1889, and thanks to 30 different stonemasons, they were able to complete the structure. It's a one-story building, it's listed on the historic registry, and it has a lot of cool information that we can learn about right here at this stop. And so this is another historic stop in the Leadville area. Surprise, surprise, brain wrinkles everywhere here in Leadville. In fact, the longer that you look around the property, the more you learn. And it says here that this was chosen because it had a cold water supply from Rock Creek, and then the 6 evergreen lakes, and its proximity to the railroads. So the hatchery was constructed, and after it was constructed, it cost about $15,000. And it was the first federal fish hatchery in the Rocky Mountain area. Now, the building itself that we are going to go in, though the shell of it is very similar, the interior very different. In fact, a lot of changes have been made to the interior of this space, and you can hardly see the original architecture that once was. But at one point, this is what the building would have looked like on the inside. Isn't that neat? It was said to be a Victorian style building, and it was constructed from red sandstone. Now, earlier we were talking about some of those larger fish, and if you come to the reflection pond here, you can actually see some of them. They're not huge, but they're much bigger than those ones that were in the raceways a while ago. It's a nice peaceful place where you can just come out and sit down, enjoy yourself, listen to some running water, and there's some other historic information that we'll check out after the visitor center, I think. It is here on the Visitor Center that you see the official National Registry of Historic Places plaque. In addition, a sign of service for 100 years of service. That 100 years passed in 1989. But perhaps one of the most interesting things about the exterior is you can really see the stone that they used. Notice, they even have like a red cement mortar that goes between them. And the building itself is fabulous looking. But the closer that you get, the more details that you can see. I think you can understand now why I love to come to places like this. The architecture is gorgeous. The finishings are beautiful. And all these years later, this is still a place that we can come today, which is absolutely epic. As you can see, very different than the original picture that we saw. The architecture has been changed so much on this interior space, but there are glimpses of the past. And if you look right in these corners, you can still see some of the original pieces. Now they have covered the ceiling, probably to make it a little bit more climate controlled realistically and to provide better lighting. But in here you can find so many different kinds of tanks, all sorts of different circulating water, very interesting facts. And there is an area for which you can walk along this side right over here. Now you can't just browse through everything because obviously this is a working hatchery site, but you can still get an idea as to what it takes to have a hatchery. And oh my goodness, it's a lot. We can stand in this area and peer out at these buckets, which are all labeled with special numbers and letters. It's kind of interesting to see. It makes you wonder, what are those? Along the walls, you see how this place works. This is an incubation tray for trout eggs. And so we can see if we can find some more of these in here somewhere. There's a little warning sign here about how we spread disease and how we can put our hands into things and it can be quite bad. So we don't want to do that while we're here. Also some more fun facts and some information that they like to share with you about cleaning your gear and where all the fish go. And also how that they are able to regulate some of the fishing that's happening in this area by encouraging anglers to put them back and to leave them be. But upon closer glance, each one of these right here has fish in it. So many fish, so many fish. Oh wow, and then there's a tank right here where you can see the fish a little bit more closely. And you can see the spots on some of them, the rainbows on others. It's kind of hard to show you this up close because of the glare from the window. But look at this, guys, isn't this neat? It's just a nice cross section to show you, you know, some of the things that are actually in those tanks over there that are a little harder to see. Oh, but wait, there's more. Right beyond that, you just keep seeing more and more of these runs. And each one, again, has fish in it, and you can kind of start to see some of the differences between the fish that are in the different areas. In fact, this one right here says it's the greenback cutthroats. Oh wow. Water is flowing everywhere, including right under our feet. And then as we continue to pass through, it tells you a bit more of the historic side of the hatchery. After being hatched, the young fish were fed cream, boiled eggs, and liver. No chemicals were used on the eggs. And the Leadville Superintendent reported in 1896 the use of a great deal of salt and earth among the fish and fry this year. This is some of the collection of the trout eggs that were here in Colorado. And they do have a couple more historic photos that you'll want to check out while you're here also. This is so neat to see how the water circulates through, and each stop that it makes along the way, it does something a little bit different. So while you walk in and it looks a little crazy to see all of these boards draped across, these boards actually serve a purpose. Something else pretty interesting is the devil's in the details, and here you can find a lot of details by just looking down. This actually tells the year and then also the gender of the individual fish that you're seeing in each tank. Are you guys ready for a fish quiz? I know I am. I love a good interactive display, so let's pick one. And it says, how long does it take rainbow trout eggs to hatch? I honestly have no idea on this one, so I'm going to say, just a wild guess, 4 weeks. Oh wow, I was actually kind of right. That's insane. So it usually takes 4 to 5 weeks. Let me go over here to what is a fry. They're not talking about a French fry, so let me say it's a male fish. No, it is not. It is a small trout that is just hatched. So it's a small fry, so that still makes sense. That's really cute. Of course, there are a handful of these that you can ask yourself while you're visiting. I encourage you guys to do that. It's just a super fun way to get a few brain wrinkles and also to kind of put the pieces together of the puzzle as we walk around. But But there's a little bit more here. There's actually a room in this direction and a room in this direction, both of which look like they have some great history. And you can definitely see the historic value of this building by just looking down at the floor. In fact, this floor is amazing and absolutely brilliant. I believe this is the original floor in addition to some of the original finishes. So this is gorgeous. As you look around the room though, you can see tons of great information, a couple of views of the great outdoors, and I think we're going to start over in this corner. Okay, so this is a little disturbing. This is actually how they harvest the eggs right here. It says to minimize the damage on the fish and the eggs, sometimes oxygen is injected into a female, into the abdomen, so that they can collect the eggs themselves. A single female rainbow trout may yield up to 5,000 eggs, and this is what those eggs look like during various stages of their life. Now they measure the eggs to see how many that they were able to harvest before they start the process of making sure that they're going through this room over here in the correct way. That way they can account for how many that they harvest versus how many turn out. And I think that that's just really interesting and something I'd never seen, so kind of cool. Now there is a phase after the fish is actually born and turns into a fry until it is released into the open. And during this time, they are fed continuously throughout the day so that they can grow. They are fed less often as they continue to grow because it takes less for them to maintain. But this is what a release-sized trout would look like right here. Did you know that fish are actually cold-blooded and the temperature of the water around them can affect how large or small that they are? In fact, that's why it's so important to have the cold water here, because the trout, for example, thrive in that, so they're more likely to reach their full potential. So the water circulating through is constantly a very, very cold feel, nothing over 55 degrees. Now, once fish do get large enough to be released, they do so with trucks like this, where the water is pressurized so that it puts them directly into the new body of water that they're going to be in. The ones that don't come out through that process are actually brought out through nets like this. Now the fish here in Leadville are released into the wild from June till September, and so you're constantly seeing a flow of fish both come and go through this hatchery as they're restocking area lakes and other places that people go to recreate. And so this is a very important place. But I also learned something else while I was standing here. Those boards that we were seeing that I said served a purpose, well, you might notice that there's also some shaded areas out in the raceways. It's because a lot of times, because of the summer heat, it gets warmer, so the fish like to hide in the shadows and it keeps them cooler. And I think that that's just really smart. So it's kind of cool to see that implemented here at the hatchery. Now along this wall you see some more examples of what the fish look like, also some of the anglers in the area. Then as you get down here, it talks about the hatchery's mission of supporting recreational fishing, but also to preserve the native fish. Why is this important? While many hatcheries were developed so that they could repopulate areas that had been overfished, they also were here because a lot of times the areas around us have a lot of degradation. And because of that, the environment for the fish is not as conducive for them being able to survive. So they're having to repopulate those areas due to various things that have happened, especially in areas that have suffered from natural disasters. So hatcheries are a very important part of the way that our nation works when it comes to having fish to consume and also to have for the ecosystem. Just across the way we see some historic photos, and these are pretty interesting because these are parts of history that I have never seen really talked about, and so I think I'm going to dive into a few of these today. Now in this display we find some of the first documents that actually brought this place to life, and it also tells about how this location at one point not only stocked the Rocky Mountain region but also shipped fish all over the place. In fact, there was at one point in time something called the fish car. Now this was in 1882 and the U.S. Fish Commission invested $7,334 to purchase this baggage car, and it was especially equipped for transporting fish. In fact, this is what it looks like right here. They had all of these tanks that were installed into what typically would have been a baggage car for regular passengers. Now, at the time, they didn't have the trucks that we just saw in the more modern days. Instead, they would use this fish car and milk jugs to transport the fish out to the different waters. And so it was a much different process of restocking at that time. The photos really do put it into perspective, and it says that this is a photo of them unloading a shipment of 10-gallon milk cans. Each one of these cars could carry 150 of these cans for a total of 15,000 3-inch fish. So like I said, a very different experience then versus now. The movement of fish in more modern times is a much more simplistic process. It also requires a lot less of those milk jugs. But as we're kind of moving around here, there's a few other things that I want to show you, including one of those milk jugs. In fact, there it is right there. This would have had a whole bunch of fish in it that would have been about 3 inches each. And it would have gone all over to the various places that needed the fish to be restocked. This is a different kind of container that was also used, and these were lightweight and stackable, and they had a perforated lid, and they could keep ice in these to keep the waters cool in the overall shipping. Now there is a little bit more of a comparison here in this one also, talking about this process and how it's changed over time. I definitely encourage you guys to check this out because of the historic photos. But there's a couple other things also I want to show you here. Like this. This is the Evergreen Lakes Hotel site. The Evergreen Lakes Hotel and Mineral Springs actually was something that was quite established in about the 1880s. This was located on a small hillside near Evergreen Lake, and guests could have a view of Mount Elbert, which is Colorado's highest peak. During its short existence, it was a focal point for social events. In fact, it was so popular that, do you remember Unsinkable Molly Brown, who was on the Titanic? She actually had her wedding breakfast at this very resort. Now, you can go into Colorado in various points and find other cool facts about Unsinkable Molly Brown, but the fact that she ties to this one is awesome. Definitely something I wouldn't have thought. Now, as we look at these other couple of photos, it says here also that the hotel was basically deserted during the long winters because of the steep, impassable roads and the deep snow. But January 19th, 1894, it actually burned to the ground. Now, in some of the reports that I was reading after seeing this, kind of with the Google fingers working because I have cell service, it said that they were very fortunate that this happened in January, because if it would have happened at any other time during the year, there would have been people inside of the facility probably fully booked. So it would have been very, very devastating. However, as you come out to this site, you learn about that, but also there was a section out here that we saw on the map earlier that we can actually see where that was located. Now, around the viewing pond, we learned a little bit more about the Superintendents Home. It was built shortly after the main hatchery was built, and it was completed and considered a remarkable Victorian architectural feat with gabled dormers, wraparound porch, and a widow's walk, in addition to gingerbread siding. And here you can see a closer picture of what that looked like at the time. It's a beautiful home, and definitely one that catches your eye a bit. You can see the various shingles and the designs and textures that they've created. It was absolutely beautiful. However, you can also see what that would have looked like in the bigger picture. This was a view of the entire property at the time of its original construction. Now, initially I thought we would take a nature walk today, but just walking around the property, I've gotten so much history that I want to just leave this here. I'm super excited about stopping here today. Tons of new brain wrinkles, and this has been on my list for the Leadville area for a while. So I think you can see why by walking around the grounds, learning a few things with me, and seeing just how cool a hatchery really can be. But not only that, how much we need these places. We need them so badly because they do so many things for us, and even though they're removed from thought most of the time, it's important to come and check one of these out at least once in a lifetime. I hope you've enjoyed coming along with me, guys. I know I have enjoyed this. If you have, remember to leave a thumbs up, hit the subscribe button, and remember, we're not here for a long time, but we are here for a good time. And places like this, all the brain wrinkles, all the cool fish, definitely are that. Until next time, guys, bye!